Good afternoon, Rob. Why don't we begin by you telling us a bit about your professional background and about the association you had, Selected Independent Funeral Homes?
Sure. Well, like most of us involved in the association world, I ended up here accidentally. I had an internship. I needed to have an internship in order to graduate from college, as most folks do, and ended up getting a full-time internship with the National Building Material Distributors Association. And I was pursuing a degree in public relations, so they brought me in to do some communications work and a little bit of PR for them. And it was during that short 3-4 months of interning there that I caught the bug, so to speak, and really enjoyed the variety and the hands-on work that typifies working for associations. And after the internship, it was a very small staff. After the internship, I went out and got a real job and ended up at a big corporation, which was fine, but it was boring, frankly. You have your list of duties that you have to do, and you get it done, and that's it. There really wasn't a whole lot of other stuff that you do. So I had my eye on association positions, even at my early career stage, and was fortunate to actually go back to the association that I interned for, the building material group, and was hired full time, and the rest is history. So I've been doing that for about 30 years. A lot of different groups, trade groups, professional groups. Spent a number of years working for some association management firms here in the Chicago area. Even was the executive director of the Maple Flooring Manufacturers Association, which, for those who are familiar with the whole CIE process, that's a famous case that we study when the Supreme Court said it was okay to collect and exchange statistical information amongst members, and ultimately ended up becoming the assistant exec at the American Society of Home Inspectors. And then shortly after that became the CEO of that organization for a number of years, for about 12 years. And felt it was time to pursue other interests. And so saw a position search for selected independent funeral homes. And something struck me about it. It just really impressed me the way they were very purposeful in who they were looking for. They were looking for their next leader. And it was impressive. So I put my name in the hat, and lo and behold, was brought on in 2007 to lead this organization. It's really been an honor to work with these folks. It's a great group. It has a tremendous history. It's 100 years old, and I'm excited to share some additional information today, with you about our membership.
So you're going on 11 years.
11 years, yeah.
Selected. Great. Why don't you tell us a bit about Selected? Tell us.
Sure. Yeah, it's a unique group. Again, I've had the privilege of working for a number of groups, and I would say Selected is definitely one of the more unique groups that I've been with. We're a fairly small organization, $2.5 million budget, 13 staff. We are here to help and represent independently owned and operated funeral homes on an international basis, but the majority of our members are here in the States. These are all family-run businesses. For those who are not aware, funeral service is still a very predominantly independent, family-run, business structure. And I'd say one of the more unique elements of Selected is that our members are brought in by invitation only. So it's really exactly as it sounds. So you have to receive an invitation to be accepted. And the way that invitation is bestowed, if you will, is members have to refer other members. In fact, we have a process where we need 3 members to serve as a sponsor, of a new member. And part of that sponsorship really means that they're attesting to the fact that they know this firm, they've worked with this firm, they feel this firm will be an active and engaged member of the organization, and they vouch for them. And after being able to have 3 members act as a sponsor, the entire membership votes on that firm. And that's still how we do it today. That's how we've been doing it for 100 years. And so because they go through this process, they are selected, right? I mean, that's why the name is what it is. They're selected, and it's a special opportunity for them. For many, it's something that they've aspired to gain. And so that's really one of the more unique elements. I like to refer to this group as a mastermind group. We're a fairly small group. There's about 500 members in North America, and then we have about 80 or so overseas, Australia, New Zealand, and the European Union as well.
Now, I understand that you've been working with your board at Selected in updating your membership model. Would you tell us a bit about that? What got you into that, and
Sure.
Why did you undertake that? And tell us what that new model looks like.
Yeah. So the model, the way it was, the model that the organization had operated in for decades. Again, heavy reliance on member referrals, but there was a time when the association, in its heyday, if you will, had 1,000 members, had 1,000 firms in North America. This is back in the early 90s, and there was a waiting list of folks who wanted in. They didn't even have a membership person on staff. Frankly, they didn't need it. And as is the case with a lot of groups, especially older trade groups, obviously things change and more opportunities become available for members to get access to help. And so in the 90s, there were a number of things that were going on. First of all, consolidation was pretty strong back then. There were a number of corporate funeral home companies purchasing members. In fact, there's probably 250 or so of our members who were purchased during that time. So it's a big chunk that left back then. But at that time, there was also a bit of a switch, and we started to see a lot of firms leaving. Now, I joined in 2007, but in 2007, but we were experiencing we were hemorrhaging, actually, losses. So at that time, the association, on average, was losing about 40 firms a year and only bringing in maybe 5 or 6. So big net losses, right? And this is an organization that's very dues reliant. When I joined 11 years ago, 80% of our income was from dues. So it was very clear that something had to be done right away. So we immediately started focusing on retention, because a lot of these firms were leaving us mainly because they just hadn't been participating, and no one really reached out to say, hey, what's going on? What can we be doing for you? So right away, when I came here, we began to build a culture within the staff, within the board of being much more proactive, right? So we were actually quite successful, and within 2 years, we took that average loss of 40 firms down to about 18 to 20. So that was our first focus, was big membership retention focus. We also began to employ, we brought a membership director on board, right, for the first time in a long time. Brought a membership director on board who was very helpful, but again, we were only able to bring in maybe 6 or 7 firms. So there were still these net losses going on. And about 5-6 years ago, we were going through some strategic planning, and I was working with a facilitator, and it was very obvious that, based on our history and based on and kind of forecasting this trend for the next 5-10 years, we were going to go out of business. I mean, there's just no way this organization was going to stay afloat, being so reliant on dues and seeing a net loss. Even though the net loss was, anywhere from 5 to 10, it was still a loss. We weren't going anywhere. And in fact, we were down to about 445 members.
Well,
So
over 50% loss.
Yeah, it was big. Now again, it took several decades to get there, but the fact was that it was there and it wasn't going away. So the board, we all saw it. It was very obvious. And so what we decided to do during that particular round of strategic planning was to change our membership model and bring a salesperson on board. Because this is an investment. This is a membership that's an investment. It's a financial investment, and it's an investment of time. The membership is for all the folks who work at the funeral home, but the owner is typically kind of the leader of that group, right? So they're investing their time, their focus, and their money to be a member of the organization. Even though there's this prestige that revolves around receiving that invitation, they still have to be active, because otherwise they're spending a lot of money to simply have the name on their wall. Keep in mind that our group, actually, our members have a territory. So there's a small mileage radius around their firms that no one else can become a member unless that member says it's okay, which is a big benefit for them, for the members, but certainly puts a hurdle up for our recruitment efforts.
Yeah, it certainly does.
So we said, we've got to change this. And so what we decided to do, as I said, was to bring somebody in who's trained in relationship sales. And there are some programs out there. Spin Sales is the one we were kind of looking at. But we began a search to bring someone in who's trained in building a relationship, because this organization is really about connecting members with other members, bringing owners together, bringing top-level directors together to be able to exchange information. And because they don't compete with each other, there is an enormous amount of information sharing.
It doesn't sound like you brought a traditional membership.
No. So we didn't even search through the association job boards, because that's not what we wanted. And it's no offense to the association side of things, but we needed a salesperson. And we were fortunate to find an individual who actually had some funeral service background, sold caskets a number of years back. So that helped tremendously, because this individual speaks their language. And right away, we began working on this culture change within the membership. Not only do we still need those referrals, but he began to really kind of zero in on why are these referrals so critical for us, and how can you give me a good referral? Don't just give me the name of some firm that you may have seen driving through another town. Let's zero in on a company that you've actually done some work with, and can tell me a bit about the owner, or tell me a bit about how they go about doing things, and why you think they might be a good member. And then from there, that relationship build involves not just our membership development director, but that member, and in many cases, other members. We begin to make these connections before they've even joined, so that it's a no-brainer. By the time they've worked with us over a few months and they've met some of our other members and they've even gained a little bit of knowledge from them, often it's kind of a done deal for them to become a member.
So it's been successful.
It's been successful, yeah. And it's been interesting too, because it's forced us to do a number of different things. So now the good news is that we've been able to turn the arrow up. We are back at 500 members. We, for the last 3 years, have had net gains instead of net losses for the first time in probably 25 years. But it's still not enough. We've got our retention at about 97%, 98%, which is great. And we've been able to increase the number of new members coming into the organization to about 20, 25, which doesn't sound like a lot, but for us, that's a lot. That's the most we've ever been able to bring into the organization. But the reality is that consolidation is still out there. In fact, we're seeing we're seeing growth and consolidation again, not from corporate, but actually from within. We're seeing a lot of our independents, our bigger independent members, grow. By adding, by bringing on smaller funeral homes, and we're also starting to see some regional consolidators get involved in funeral service. So we're still facing these challenges, and so now we're go ahead.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Well, now we're getting to this point where we're saying, okay, so this was a good step. This is a good move. In fact, one of the experiments that we tried, Doug, was about 2 years ago. We went out and brought an individual on board who helped us with obtaining some data. So we began to target specific states and zero in on independent funeral homes that were obviously not members of the organization, but who had kind of fit this profile, if you will, that we see within our own membership in terms of revenue, in terms of number of employees, in terms of age, et cetera, et cetera. And so what we did from that exercise was we would zero in on a particular state, we would narrow this list down, and we would have 5 or 6 funeral homes, prospects, excuse me, who we would then target. But before we would reach out to those firms, our membership development director would talk to local members and say, do you know these firms? We've identified them. We think they're good prospects. Do you know them? And what was interesting was that what we found in those discussions with our members, it actually elicited even more referrals. And in some cases, they'd say, well, why isn't so-and-so on your list? That's a firm we should go after. So it immediately, the light bulb went off, and we said, we got to stop just asking for blanket referrals. We've got to help our members, be able to recognize other potential firms. And so now our focus is really kind of zeroing in on helping our members. When we have a meeting, anytime we have a meeting where members are together, the language that the staff speaks while we're there typically revolves around who's not here that you would like to see next year. Who do you want sitting next to you next year? Because this is a group, again, that is really zeroed in on networking and being able to share good ideas with each other. And that's helped tremendously to be able to improve the quality of referrals.
So this very focused approach, this more aggressive sales approach, has turned things around, basically. But you're still in a very challenging environment. So as you look ahead, how do you see tweaking this model? What are some things you're thinking about?
Well, we're at a point now, and we knew this was going to come, but we're at a point now where it's time to bring another salesperson on board. One person is only capable of doing so many things. So that's probably our next biggest step is to add another salesperson to the team. And our current development director is not even physically here in the office. He resides out east, and he has the capability of traveling around. And I would say this next individual, it'll be the same type of situation, is to actually have them crisscrossing the country. I think another step that we will likely initiate is to with database usage and all of the great IT advancements and tech tools that are there, we've been able to zero in on every individual member's activity, right? So we operate at a level of customer intimacy here because we have to. I mean, that's how it works for us. And so it's great that we know all this information, but again, what we're finding is that we need somebody to foster more engagement with these firms. So I think another position we're likely to bring on board eventually here is an engagement person, an engagement manager, director, whatever we call them. But their role will also be to travel around, to interact with, especially with our members that are not very active to be able to find ways to, make sure that when that dues invoice shows up, there is no question in their mind that they'll renew. And I think probably one of the bigger next steps for us is to really have a heart-to-heart conversation with our membership about those territories. Again, it's a unique feature of the organization, but the reality is, and it was set up at a time when a lot of firms were concerned about the competition down the street. Mm-hmm. But it's different now, right? In most businesses, competition is no longer down the street. It's online. It's all over the place. Consumers are handling arrangements very differently now. And so what we believe is
Give
that...
us an example of that. When you say arrangements, you mean funeral arrangements,
mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
Give us some examples of what are some of the changes going on?
Well, certainly we've seen a tremendous rise in cremation versus burial, which is a disposition, but there is a perception that many consumers have that cremation typically does not include a service or often the services of a funeral home, right? So mm-hmm. there are many low-cost cremation operators out there who will work with you online. So other than signing off on a form to approve the cremation, there is no interaction. There is simply online, here's what I want, here's the details, I'll stop over and sign the form, and that's the end of it. And that's disappointing. Obviously, that's not a trend that any of us involved with funeral service want to see, but it is in fact a reality. And there are many consumers out there that just prefer to do it that way. So that's certainly a big change. I mean, it's not the only one, but that's certainly one that we're seeing. I think a lot of consumers are just you look at real estate, look at car buying. I mean, there's so many different trades out there that have very similar type of, right? Consumers are so much more educated now. They have access to every possible, help that they can find. Not all of it is 100% accurate, but it's out there. And that's changing how people are behaving. That's changing the way that they're being involved. And the same holds true for funeral service. So that's why I think we will likely be going back to the membership to say, it's time for us to perhaps eliminate those territories so that it opens the door for us. Nothing changes in how we invite a member in, right? We could go back to the very beginning of our conversation. It is about an invitation, and that invitation is very dependent on the quality of that firm. And in fact, it's better, right? We feel it's better to be able to compete with someone at the same level, right, as you, than perhaps competing with someone who may not have, the highest ethics or the same level of knowledge that you have, right? So it's a change. It's a culture change, and in a group like ours that's 100 years old, that's going to take some work for us to accomplish. But I feel like we'll get to that point.
Would you say a couple more words, Rob, about this engagement concept as different from the sales rep approach you initially took? What do you mean by an engagement officer?
Oh, well,
staff person?
So for us, because we don't have this big, massive membership, every single member is handled individually, right? I referenced customer intimacy, and that's a culture that we've established here. And the only way to have customer intimacy is really a one-on-one relationship with every single firm. Our aim is to make sure that when we're talking to a member, in their mind, they're the only member. And because of all the stuff that I've shared with you, the invitation and the involvement, the investment that goes into being a part of this organization, we feel we have a very captive audience. Right? These folks pay money, time, and effort to be here, so they're engaged. And a lot of associations don't have that, and it's not a knock against the association, but they just don't. Right? They have whatever 800 members, 1,000 members, and a certain percentage of those members are mailbox members, or they're just not connected, and frankly, they're not paying any attention. At least with our group, we feel like, okay, well, there's a reason for them to be here. They want to be here. Well, even in that kind of a situation, there's still a group that are not fully engaged, and it's a lot of money to invest, frankly, to not be engaged. The gain that you get out of being a part of this organization really comes from participation. One of the values of Selected is that members are teachers and students simultaneously, right? And we really push that. We really foster that. So the engagement is critical, because if they're not taking advantage of that, if they're not participating in one of our programs or interacting with other members, they're not engaged and they're not gaining anything. And that's a firm that's going to leave. I mean, that's the red flag firm for us. So when I reference the engagement person, that's really what the focus is going to be, is to not just promote our programs and services, but really begin to have a conversation with an owner and with their staff to say, where are you struggling right now? What can actually I misspoke. Where are you struggling? What's happening? And that person will be trained to listen for key words, for key issues. Right? Well, we've got. I'm just giving an example. We've got a up-and-coming, a young person on our staff team who is really great at running a funeral, but I want to get them into management. I want to get them, leading other people here, but they don't have any training. Oh, great. Well, you know what? We have a program that can help you with that. We have a leadership training academy. We have a next-gen program. So see, it's really it's much more of a listening role to try to zero in on areas that we could help that member by offering services, versus us just kind of blanket versus a blanket approach of trying to promote all our stuff and hope that someone sees that that promo and says, oh, I should send one of my people over there. So it's much more of an engagement level. It's much more of a one-on-one, like a concierge almost, to try to strengthen the relationship that we have with that firm.
Well, it really is a kind of concierge concept, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
Couldn't be more different from the traditional association approach to membership.
Right. But I think there's some, and having worked in a number of other groups where that didn't exist, I see some value in, almost, and it's hard to do with some groups, but I see value there. It might sound a little old-fashioned, but there's still value there. And it may be because they're family businesses or they're independent businesses, so they certainly are behind the eight ball, and they're desperately trying to serve their communities and maintain that position they have in their community, right? So they're busy running their business, and our job is to help them run their business. Our job is to help them actually increase their success.
Now, I may be off base a bit here, but it seems to me that in a sense you're also fostering ownership among your members of Selected, the feeling that they're not just paying members. Beyond that, they're really owners of the association. That makes sense?
They are. Yeah, it does, and you're not off base at all. In fact, the average firm, the average member has maintained continuous membership for 30-plus years. We just celebrated last year. We celebrated our 100th birthday, our 100th anniversary, and we actually had 3 firms that celebrated 100 years of continuous membership with us. So we have a unique relationship with these firms, and there is ownership. And because there's a family generational element there too, it's almost in some cases we see it's almost handed down from generation to generation. You know, we'll see owners bring their kids, and sometimes their kids are 10, and sometimes their kids are 20.
Great.
And so, yeah, there is an ownership there. There is a strong connection with with a lot of our members.
Well, Rob, I want to thank you for this fascinating story. Selected's obviously doing some really innovative things on the membership front, and we'll have to do a part 2